Well, hello everyone. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad you're watching this. And first of all, notice my shirt is a brand new t-shirt. I was a huge Lone Ranger fan growing up, and one of my favorite movies is Hang 'em High. And about 20 years ago, when I first learned that both the character, Clint Eastwood's character in Hang 'em High, as well as the Lone Ranger I grew up watching as a kid, those characters were based on Bass Reeves, the first African American United States Marshal who oversaw the Indian territory in Oklahoma and Texas and so forth. And so anyway, I saw this the other day and I thought I got to have that. I love Bass Reeves. I love Hang 'em High, and I love the Lone Ranger. So anyway, I'm going to do something a little bit different today. This is going to be a long form format. I'm going to try to use a PowerPoint a little bit because I just want to maybe do a little bit of teaching, I think, over what's going on the last week, mainly with the No Kings Day rally last weekend and some of the responses to it. So I just want to kind of address that and talk about at least where I think we are as a country. And I'm not alone. There are many other people who feel the same way. So the second No Kings rally was held in the United States last Saturday, October 18th, 2025. And it's been estimated that over 7 million people participated in these rallies over 2,500 plus cities across the United States. Thus, it makes this the largest single day protest in the history of the United States. But many people are asking, well, what were they protesting exactly? Well, simply put, they were protesting the slide that they see, and I would include myself in this, but the slide that they see away from a democracy toward a more authoritarianism form of government by the Trump administration. The message behind the No Kings rally was that in the United States, sovereignty belongs to the people, not a single leader or a single party or a small group of rich and powerful people. Now, you can disagree with whether our country is moving away from a democracy to authoritarianism, but you cannot disagree with the message behind No Kings. That's what the message was. And you can't disagree on their right to express their opinions and protest in the public square. Nothing is more American and more patriotic than peaceful, nonviolent protest. I think, or at least I hope, one thing we can all agree on is that the President of the United States reposting a video of himself flying a military aircraft and defecating on protesters was inappropriate, immoral, and wrong. Even if it was meant to be humorous or satirical, it was still wrong. Again, you can disagree with the protest, but you cannot disagree on the rights of citizens to protest. Decades ago, at the beginning of my research for my doctoral dissertation, I had a professor at the beginning of the class say this, and I've never forgotten it. He said, "The beginning of wisdom is in the definition of its terms." And I think here's what he meant by that. People on all sides of an issue speak the same words, but often their definitions of those words differ. As a result, it's very difficult for us to agree on issues when we can't even agree on the definition of key terms. As a result of that, we talk past each other, and because I'm defining my words one way and somebody else is defining the same words another way. And so it's hard to reach a consensus. You may not agree with what I'm about to say, but I hope that you can at least know what I say and what I mean by what I say. And so I want to give you 8 definitions, and I'm going to use the PowerPoint to do this, but 8 definitions of some key terms that I'm going to be using throughout this video. So let me see if I can get this to work the way I want it to. All right. Definition number 1, autocracy. What I mean by that, my definition is autocracy is a governmental rule by one person with absolute power. Dictatorship would be the extreme form of the autocracy type of rule. Authoritarianism, a political system that rejects Pluralism uses strong central powers, limits democracy, rights, and the rule of law. Oligarchy, governmental rule by a small group of powerful people. Competitive authoritarianism, a governmental rule whereby a leader comes to power democratically and then erodes the system of checks and balances. Democracy, a system of government where the citizens of a state exercise power to rule the state either directly or through electing representatives. Liberal democracy, governmental rule where citizens have more political and civil rights, uh, and thus the more political and the more civil rights people in a country have, the more liberal that democracy is. Representative republic. A representative republic is a form of government in which citizens elect representatives to make decisions and pass laws on their behalf. Anocracy. Countries whose government are neither full autocracies or full democracies. So keep those definitions in mind as we move forward. Um, that last definition in anocracies, citizens get some level of democratic rule, like elections, but they also get leaders with lots of authoritarian powers. So, what do these definitions have to do with the No Kings rally? Well, I'm glad you asked. The message behind the No Kings rally has been misrepresented by its opponents. Unfortunately, the opponents are highly powerful people within the Republican Party, like Mike Johnson, Ted Cruz, and others, and they really know better than what they are doing. Their misrepresentation, in other words, is intentional. The clear and concise message behind the No Kings rallies was to protest the slide away from a liberal democracy toward a more authoritarianist form of government. Now, hear me out. No one believes President Trump is a king or that he will ever be a king. We as a country rebelled against the King of England to form our country, and we don't want to go back to either a king or a queen or an autocrat or any type of authoritarianism or an oligarchy. We don't want those things. I can hear people say and scream, yeah, but Kevin, the United States is not a democracy. We are a representative republic. And they are right. The United States does not operate by majority rule like a pure democracy would. And that's a good thing. You see, one of the main purposes and one of the main objectives of a representative republic is to protect the rights of minorities and those on the margins of society. Thus, we elect representatives to govern us. However, those representatives are elected through a democratic vote. This includes the Electoral College, where each state, through a democratic election, determines who will receive the Electoral College votes of that state. It's important to note that the Electoral College system is only for presidential elections. All other votes to elect our representatives are democratic votes, the majority rules votes. You could say not all democracies are representative republics, but all representative republics are a democracy. In other words, the United States government is a combination of a democracy and a representative republic. The odds of the president of the United States becoming a dictator are slim. But the idea that the present administration is moving us away from a democracy and towards a more authoritarian government is not an irrational idea. There is proof that this is happening, thus the need for a No Kings rally. Where is this proof? Well, in 2022, Dr. Barbara F. Walter, professor of international relations at the University of California, San Diego, wrote a fascinating book titled How Civil Wars Start and How to Stop Them. In the book, she discusses her time serving on the government-sponsored Political Instability Task Force, or PITF. This task force was first formed in 1994, and their purpose was to collect Civil War data from around the world. PITF categories or puts countries into three categories. You're either democratic, autocratic, or you're an anocracy. Over time, they have been able to use this data to predict where instability is most likely to occur. In other words, they can predict where civil wars are most likely to occur. What they have discovered is that civil wars are most likely to occur in countries that are anocracies, not authoritarianism or not democracies, but anocracies, meaning that their country is neither fully autocratic or fully democratic. Anocracies are where most civil wars occur. One of the measures PITF uses to place a country in one of those three categories is called the polity score. The polity score is a 21-point scale that ranges from -10, that's the most autocratic, to +10, the most democratic. Countries receiving a score between +6 and +10 are considered full democracies. And until recently, the United States received a +10 ranking. Countries receiving a score between -6 and -10 are considered autocracies. Countries receiving a score between the -5 and +5 in the middle are considered anocracies and are in the most danger of experiencing a civil war, -5 to +5. Surprisingly, PITF has observed that countries moving from a democracy down to an anocracy are more likely to have a civil war than countries moving from an autocracy form of government to an anocracy. Dr. Walters writes this: if you were an analyst in a foreign country looking at events in America the same way you look at events in Ukraine or the Ivory Coast or Venezuela, you would go down a checklist assessing each of the conditions that make civil war likely. And what you would find is that the United States, a democracy founded more than 2 centuries ago, has entered very dangerous territory. The PITF has collected polity data going all the way back to 1776. According to the polity score, the United States was an anocracy, a score of +5 between the years 1797 and 1800. In 1801, our polity score increased to +6. In 1829, for the first time, our score reached a +10. Beginning in 1850, our score started to drop, reaching +8 before the Civil War, the war between the states. We recovered in 1877 after the war and did not have another dip until the 1960s and 1970s, where we dropped again to +8. After President Nixon resigned, we went back to a score of +10. But once again, after the 2016 elections, we fell to +8. In 2019, during the impeachments of President Trump, our score dropped to +7. Then, after January 6, 2021, our score dropped from +5 or +7 to +5. +5, our lowest score since 1800. Remember, we were at a +8 when the war between the states broke out, and we are currently at a +5 on this polity scale. In the spring of 2025, a Brightline Watch survey was released. The survey asked US-based professors to rate the performance of American democracy on a scale from 0, meaning complete dictatorship, to 100, meaning complete democracy. These scholars were asked to consider 30 indicators of democratic performance. These indicators included government interference with the press, punishing political opponents, and basic checks and balances between the judiciary and the executive authority. Immediately following the 2024 elections, the professors, these scholars, gave American democracy a rating of 67. By March of 2025, that figure fell to 55 out of 100. The consensus of some of the top United States professors is that our country is moving in the wrong direction. The Brightline Watch survey shows that academics in government and political science are troubled by President Trump's attempt to expand executive power. Three examples were given in this article about this Bright survey. Three examples were given of the Trump administration using tactics employed by autocrats. And I wrote them down for you to remember. So let me bring this back up. Three examples. One, Trump's Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, investigating all the major broadcast outlets except Fox News. Two, withholding or threatening to withhold billions of dollars from our top universities is what that should say. And three, the fear of government retribution. If you speak out against Trump, especially if you're a powerful person or somebody in a political party or somebody who ran opposed to him, and you speak out against him, the fear of retribution and ultimately arrest. Now, CNN politics, and I know me even mentioning CNN is going to turn some people off, but do the research and make sure what CNN reported is accurate before you just blatantly say CNN doesn't know what they're talking about. CNN Politics published a story on August the 13th, 2025, that listed 7 of President Trump's most authoritarian moves so far. And here are those 7. This is examples or illustrations of us moving from a democracy to a more authoritarian form of government. Number 1, putting military on U.S. soil, which we have seen all over. Tariffs, and making these tariffs without congressional approval. Investigation of his opponents, which we have seen. Magnifying the government's independent functions. President Trump has said he can do whatever he wants to do. His coercion of the media, universities, and even law firms. Ignoring Congress, and there's more than this, but 2 examples of him ignoring Congress would be what happened with the TikTok stuff and disregarding congressional appropriated spending. Number 7, skirting due process and the rule of law on deportations. And I would add even on using military strikes without approval. So you see, there is proof that we are moving away from a democracy to a more authoritarian type of government. The reason I'm saying all this is to say that supporters of the No Kings rally are not suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, and neither do they hate their country. They are concerned about the direction President Trump is taking our country, and there is evidence that their concerns are valid. Now, the United States will not go straight from a complete democracy to an autocracy overnight. That's just not how it works. We will become an anocracy first. You could say we are already on the edge of an anocracy by that score of +5. Remember, countries that have a score of -5 to +5 are considered anocracies. We will not quickly nor easily lose our democracy, but we are quickly sliding into what scholars call competitive authoritarianism, where our democratic leaders are elected, but then they begin eroding our systems of checks and balances. We are not headed towards North Korea or China, but we are headed towards Hungary and Turkey. Let me leave you with these words from the prophet Samuel. His words serve as a warning to us today. And this is from 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 10 through 12. And I'm reading from the Message version of the Old Testament. So Samuel told them, deliver God's warning to the people who were asking him to give them a king. He said, this is the way the kind of king you're talking about operates. He'll take your sons and make soldiers of them, chariotry, cavalry, infantry, regimented in battalions and squadrons. He'll put some to forced labor on his farms, plowing and harvesting, and others to making either weapons of war or chariots in which he can ride in luxury. He'll put your daughters to work as beauticians and waitresses and cooks. He'll conscript your best fields, vineyards, and orchards and hand them over to his special friends. He'll tax your harvest and vintage to support his extensive bureaucracy. Your prize workers and best animals he'll take for his own use. He'll lay a tax on your flocks, and you'll end up no better than slaves. The day will come when you will cry in desperation because of this king you so much want for yourselves. But don't expect God to answer. Just something to think about.